President apparently decided the 11th hour to not attack because he thought it would be a disproportionate response. Should you Democrats be giving him credit for not having done that because it would have been disproportionate?
I don't believe that anyone should receive credit for a crisis of their own making. And there is no question in my mind that the current occupant of the White House, President Trump, put in place a series of events that led to that event. And we should take seriously what people who've been doing this work for a long time have told us, which is that the president's actions have been erratic and irresponsible.
How would President Harris fix the problem?
Well, frankly, I believe that we need to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. I would strengthen it. I would include ballistic missile testing. I think that we can strengthen what we do in terms of monitoring and verification of progress. But there's no question that a lot of negotiation with a great deal of depth took place over a long period of time to reach that agreement. And it was an agreement that was being complied with by all parties. And so under a Harris administration, we would attempt to get back into the agreement, and again, strengthening it, but understanding that we are in the best situation when we are working with our allies and are able to monitor Iran's activities and do it in a way that requires full compliance with our standards.
You're on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Yes.
Where do you rank Iran in terms of threats to the United States?
I am on the Senate Intelligence Committee. On a very consistent basis, I receive classified briefings about the threats to our nation's security. And I can tell you that we live in a dangerous world and that we have to take seriously any possible and potential threats to our nation. And on the list of potential threats, especially in terms of nuclear threat, North Korea is, of course, on that list, and Iran is on that list. And there are others. But we have to conduct ourselves in a way that we are smart about what we do to have one and one goal only, which is ensuring that our nation is secure. And it cannot be the goal to express one's ego and to engage in gamesmanship without much serious regard to the consequence. And I think that's what we've seen in this president.
So who's our greatest global foe?
I would present the question differently, which is what is our greatest political, our national security threat? I would say that cybersecurity is one of the highest in terms of what should be a concern. Cybersecurity on a number of levels. We've seen what happens in terms of how we can face cybersecurity threats as it relates to Russia's interference in the election of the President of the United States. Remembering, of course, that our elections infrastructure has been designated as critical infrastructure of our nation. When we talk about it in terms of the energy grid, when we talk about it in terms of the vulnerability of our financial systems, all of which are vulnerable to attack. In fact, I have a bill that is a bipartisan bill with a Republican senator, James Lankford from Oklahoma, to secure and better secure our elections infrastructure. But the Republican leadership will not put it on the floor for a vote, and there are some indications it's because the president won't sign that bill. So, you know, I think that when we talk about the greatest threats to our national security, there are ways that we can address them. But instead, this president wants to focus on creating conflict where none exists. He wants to incite fear in the American public, which is what he has done when he continuously has talked about this multi-billion-dollar wall, which, by the way, will not get built. And we need to do better, and we can do better, which is why I'm running for president.
The president is set to meet with Vladimir Putin at the G20. Would you meet with him if you're president?
It depends. I mean, listen, I believe that we do have to have open lines of communication. And I will never foreclose that as a viable option. But let's be clear about this president's relationship with Russia. The current president of the United States has taken the word of the Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community. The current president of the United States has taken, and on the issue of the election in 2016, the current president of the United States takes the word of a North Korean dictator over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to an American student who was tortured and later died. The current president of the United States takes the word of a Saudi prince over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a journalist who was assassinated, a journalist who has American credentials. So I would not do that. I trust the intelligence community
But
of
you
the
might
United
have to meet
States.
with Putin.
But it would not be without an appropriate amount of, one, reading the briefing book. Let's start there. Sadly, that we even have to talk about that as being a requirement. It would not be without meeting with leaders in our Department of State, meeting with our military leaders to determine what is the smartest and best course of action for the United States. These are not just about relationships that are based on some trust or maybe previous relationship that president has with the president of Russia. It has to be based on what is in America's best interest, not self-interest.
Trump administration's on the verge of rounding up immigrant families across the country. If one of those families is watching or listening, what's your message to them right now?
My message to them is that you are not alone and we stand with you, and there are those of us who will fight for you and your rights every day. My message to them is do not live in fear. You are not alone, and America's values are such that we do not condone, as an American value, putting children in cages. America's values are not that we separate families and take children from their parents. And I would tell them that a new day is coming. We got to get beyond this election, but that we as a nation are better than this. Because I'm going to tell you, the reason I say all that is that I know how this is going to play out. And I know what's been happening since the beginning when this president was elected, which is these immigrant families have been further pushed into to living underground, to living in the shadows. That's not reflective of the civil society.
If ICE comes looking for them, should they hide? Should they stay in the shadows?
Listen, I'll tell you what they're going to do. I'll tell you what they're going to do because it's already happened. Children will not want to go to school out of fear that if they go to school, they will come home and their parents won't be there because they will have been picked up and deported. There will be children, and parents will not send those children to the pediatrician for fear that if they walk into a hospital, they will be deported. What will happen is a victim of rape or child molestation or fraud will not wave down a police officer in the middle of the street for fear that if they have that contact, they will be deported. These are the things that will happen. These are the things that will happen.
Those thousands in detention facilities along the border, if they're still there, you take office. What happens to them?
Well, first of all, it's about understanding why they are there. And the majority of them are there because they have fled murder capitals of the world. And I think it's very important that when we think about this issue, we understand it in the context of real people and what they are experiencing.
So how do you treat them once they're here?
What you do is you give them the benefit of a process that we put in place a very long time ago, anticipating that there will be people around the globe who will flee harm, who will flee danger and arrive at our shores. And we put in place a process because we said, as Americans, we have strong arms that will embrace those who are being hurt. So we put in place a process to hear their stories, to determine the legitimacy of their stories, and if their story is legitimate, to give them a place of refuge and safety. And as President of the United States, I will make sure that is a real process so that we can hear their claims, and if they are deserving of protection, we will give it to them.
But they wouldn't be released from those detention facilities the moment you take office?
Well, no, listen, there has to be a process in place. But let's be clear. I mean, we can get into the details of this. Part of what we had under the previous administration, which worked actually better than what's happening now, is we had a process where people would be released from custody with an order to return, but they would go to these family centers, and actually it had a 90-something% rate of return. So let's again figure out what the goal is. Is the goal to put people in cages, or is the goal to make sure that we have a process by which we make sure that those who deserve safety and refuge, that they receive it, and those who don't, if there are any who are trying to game the system, then they don't receive it.
Let's talk about Joe Biden.
Okay.
You've criticized him for praising his ability to work with people who had very different views.
No, that wasn't my criticism.
What was your criticism?
Because I applaud any effort to work across party lines around common goals and common interests. And in fact, I'm proud that two of my most significant legislative efforts and successes in the United States Senate are both bipartisan. So I believe it is very important, it is critical for the health and for the well-being of our nation that we find common ground and work toward that.
What bothered you?
Praising and coddling individuals who made it their life works and built their reputation off of segregation of the races in the United States. That's a problem. I would not be a member of the United States Senate if those men that he praised had their way. I wouldn't.
And one of the things they did is, and he inferred this, is they might have called someone like him who was younger son. They might have called a black man boy. And that's been part of the issue for a lot of African Americans we've talked to here and across the country.
Of course it is.
Is that offensive to you?
It is. We cannot be ignorant of the history of race in this country. And certainly anyone who is a leader should not be. That is a very loaded term, loaded with a history that includes extreme racism, violence, discrimination, prejudice, you name it, all of that. It's a very loaded term. And I think it is very important that we all who are leaders or profess to be leaders, that we choose our words carefully, understanding the significance and the power of our words.
Can you recall a time in your past in the workplace where someone might have used that kind of patronizing or derogatory language with you?
To call me boy?
Well, not boy, but not boy.
No,
maybe something else.
Not directly in the workplace. No, not directly.
You said a few weeks ago you were being asked this chatter about you being Biden's running mate. Mm-hmm. And you said, well, he's perfectly qualified to be a running mate.
Yes, he is.
In light of these comments, though, if you were looking at someone's record, would it disqualify him?
I got to win first, and then we can have this conversation.
You have said that the House should start impeachment proceedings on the president. He says now, and his campaign manager told us, that they think that'll help him get reelected. Is that a risk Democrats can afford?
It is certainly a risk. I wouldn't doubt that. I don't doubt that. I think that there is, however, no question that if you've read the Mueller report, which I have, it clearly outlines at least 10, one would argue 11, counts of obstruction of justice. And further, that Bob Mueller has told us in many ways, I believe, that the only reason he did not return an indictment as special counsel is because of a Department of Justice memo that says the sitting president cannot be indicted. But if you also go on to read what's in these documents, and including that memo, you will know that it leaves open explicitly the right of Congress, and perhaps the duty even of Congress, to act. And the way Congress then must act is to take a look at this and open an inquiry into what exactly was the conduct and whether there should be accountability for that conduct. And so this, I believe, is a matter that is about fighting for the integrity of the system of our democracy, which was designed specifically with checks and balances to ensure that there would not be an abuse of power.
But if it costs your party power?
Well, this is the existential question. You're exactly right. You're right. This is the tension. This is the tension, which is, do you stand to fight for these principles that were part of the spirit behind the design of our democracy, checks and balances, accountability? Or do you stand with strategy, which is what is the ultimate goal, and if it's saying that this guy should not be in office, and if this could hurt the chances of winning an election, should you hold off? This is a tension, and I think each person is going to have to make a decision about where they stand. I have chosen to stand with the position that I believe the proceedings should begin.
You're gearing up for your first debate. We talked a little bit about this earlier.
Yeah.
How are you preparing?
Well, I'm here in South Carolina. I'm talking with folks and listening to them more than I'm talking, I hope, and getting a sense of what is on people's mind. You know, the way that I think about issues, frankly, you know, I know there are a lot of people who talk about it in terms of what is your ideological perspective, what is, you know, this intellectual kind of debate about what kind of Democrat are you. Well, let me just tell you, the way I think about the things that are my priorities are, you know, what I call, you know, my 3 o'clock in the morning agenda. What are the things that wake people up in the middle of the night? Because these are things that have been weighing on them and they just can't get to sleep. And those are the priorities I have. And it's through that lens that I think about issues like health care, issues like what people need to get through the end of the month and be able to pay their bills, which is why I'm proposing what has been considered one of the most significant middle-class tax cuts in generations. It's the things that keep people up at night in terms of making sure that their kids are going to be safe at school and not have to worry about a mass shooter. These are the issues that I think about based on, again, what I call my 3 o'clock in the morning agenda. And so...
But do you line up like 9 of your aides and say, let's practice 10 people on a stage?
Well, I think we will do that. We haven't yet. But you know, I'll be working on it. That's for sure.
What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about you?
I'll tell you who I believe myself to be and who I am.
But there's got to be something you're hearing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that people are curious about my background as a prosecutor. And I think also, though, that we're clearing the record on that. I'm a daughter of parents who were active in the civil rights movement. I experienced bias in terms of the criminal justice system growing up. It's not something I learned in school. It's not an intellectual point for me. And so when I made a decision to become a prosecutor, it was a very conscious decision. And it was a decision that I made believing that what needs to be reformed can also be done from the system and be done inside where the decisions are being made. And I also decided to become a prosecutor because, frankly, I feel a very strong sense of responsibility to protect people, and in particular protect the most vulnerable and voiceless. And so I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of starting one of the first reentry initiatives in the country focused on low-level drug offenders and getting them jobs and counseling and dismissing the charges against them so they could go on to live a productive life. I'm also proud of my record of having successfully prosecuted predators, including rapists, including murderers, including the biggest banks of the United States around the foreclosure crisis, including taking on pharmaceutical companies. So I think that if there's any question of the reason that I do what I do, probably one of my strongest instincts and reasons for doing a lot of what I've done in my life has been to protect people.
You take your prosecutorial record against the push in your party for criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of concern among especially more liberal and younger parts of the party. You may not be the best person to do that, given that you were implementing those tough on crime initiatives as a prosecutor. Can they trust you to do that?
Well, here's the thing. When I became a prosecutor and when I was elected district attorney and also attorney general of California, I implemented some of the most significant reforms to date during those years that had been implemented. like I said, I created one of the first reentry initiatives that became a model. It was designated as a model in the United States for what law enforcement should do to be, as I call it, smart on crime. I was the first in the nation leading the State Department of Justice in California, which, by the way, is the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, to require my agents to wear body cameras. I created, as Attorney General, the first in the nation implicit bias and procedural justice training for law enforcement, knowing that that had to be addressed, which is the implicit bias that exists in law enforcement and the potentially lethal outcomes that occur from that.
So the concerns are overblown.
The concerns are overblown, yes, no question.
As we wrap up,
Yes.
You talked about 3 a.m., but let's talk about you for a second. You're lying in bed at night, going to bed.
Yeah.
What keeps you up?
What keeps me up is, I'll tell you, what keeps me up are issues like these kids in cages. What keeps me up is knowing that we could be on the potential of going to war because of the ego of the current president of the United States. What keeps me up is knowing that I've met with farmers in Iowa who've got soybeans rotting in bins because of a trade policy that has not been about protecting working people in America, but again has been about trade policy by tweet. These are the things that keep me up at night. What keeps me up at night is that the women of our nation, as it relates to their access to reproductive health care, that is under attack, and that poor women in America may be precluded from having access to the health care they need because they don't have money to travel to another state that recognizes the dignity of women and the right that they have to make decisions about their own bodies. These are the things that keep me up at night.
You want to keep going?
I could keep going.
You sure?
What else you got? What else is over there on that list, Ed? Your voice is getting better.
It is. See, that's the thing. You could redo the whole thing. How long have you wanted to be president?
A year and something.
When was the moment that you said, I gotta do this?
I think I'll tell you, it was actually presented to me as something I should seriously consider, and it was after the election in 2016.
By who?
I'm not telling you.
Somebody
But
important.
many people,
Yeah.
many people, yeah. Yeah, but many people.
So the moment you get to Washington, you're already thinking about.
No, I wasn't, because I actually dismissed it as, it wasn't, I mean, it has not been my life's aim. I'm not one of the however many candidates who were born thinking they'd be president of the United States.
Is it weird hanging out with 19, 20 other people who want to be president?
I work with many of them, and I like and respect them. So it's, last night was the first night we've all really been together and hanging out together as a group, and it's great. I mean, we're having, a very unique experience to run for president of the United States, and many of us are having the same experiences, which is, probably not sleeping enough, not eating as well as we should, not spending enough time with our families as much as we would like to. So there is a shared, I think, bond in terms of the experience we're having.
To get awkward in there, backstage?
It didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel awkward. No.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. On this day after Christmas, we bring you a special conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris. We met up with her last week in her ceremonial office in the old Executive Office building for a wide-ranging conversation. Everything from COVID to voting rights to the criticism that she has faced in her job. Medical experts are projecting that we could see as many as 1 million infections per day because of this new Omicron variant. Is our healthcare system prepared for what's coming?
We are prepared for it, and there's no question. There is a lot about this moment that is frustrating, but let's not forget our individual power to actually do something about it. Everyone has to get vaccinated. The vaccines are free, they are safe, and they'll save your life.
We're already seeing hospitals overwhelmed with Delta. Inflation is real. It's going to be with us as long as the pandemic dominates. As you know, the exhaustion is just with us all the time. When can you tell the American people this will end?
we have the power today to have an impact on tomorrow. And we can't shortchange the significance of that. We have the power today to go out, and if you've not been boosted, go get boosted. The power today to go and get vaccinated. And that will have an impact on where we end up tomorrow.
Is it the fault of the unvaccinated?
I don't think this is a moment to talk about fault. It is no one's fault that this virus hit our shores or hit the world. I would not blame it on anyone in that way, but it is more about individual power and responsibility, and it's about the decisions that everyone has the choice to make, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But it is clear that everyone has the ability to make a choice to save their lives and to prevent hospitalization if they get vaccinated and if they get the booster. And so I urge people to do that.
This is going to be hard for the economy. Are you going to need to ask Congress for another relief package?
Well, let's talk about the economy. What is within our grasp? To pass Build Back Better, when we talk about the economy, the average person in America is going to measure the economy based on, can they actually just afford to get through the day and through the month? The cost of living, can they keep up with the cost of living? Childcare, elder care, prescription drugs.
You're talking about the Build Back Better Act like it still has some life to it. As you know, Senator Joe Manchin said he's a no. You don't have the votes.
I'm not giving up, the president's not giving up, and frankly, the stakes are too high.
It is the cost of the bill that has led Senator Joe Manchin, at least publicly, to say it's actually going to hurt the economy. His argument is it'll add to inflation, among many other things.
I think there is, without any question, room for discussion about what actually will be the impact to the economy, and objective, leading, and highly respected economists are weighing in on this discussion to say, in fact, no.
When you look at what's actually possible right now,
Yeah.
Do you feel that Senator Manchin is playing fair with you?
I think the stakes are too high for this to be in any way about any specific individual. We have to, one of the things.
It's a 50-50 Senate, though, so
It is. I'm the tiebreaker.
Exactly.
In fact, the president and I joke, and when I leave one of our meetings to go break a tie, he says, well, that's going to be a winning vote. Whenever I vote, we win. It's a joke we have. But the stakes are so high. And we can't afford, in this moment of time where we have an opportunity to do something so substantial in terms of public policy in America, to literally help families. I refuse to get caught up in what might be personal politics when the people who are waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning worried about how they're going to get by could care less about the politics of DC. They just want us to fix things.
But the child care tax credit has already expired. How do you
We have to
come
extend
up with
it.
it?
We have
How
to
do you do
extend
that
it.
without
Well,
Senator Manchin?
you don't give up. That's how we do it. We don't give up. That's how.
So the president has also put you in charge of voting rights.
Yeah. I've asked. Yeah. There is so much about this fight for justice and the ideals of our democracy that are part of just my DNA. I've been meeting with prime ministers and presidents from around the world. One of my favorite interactions was with the now past Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. She came over for breakfast. And we talked about everything that has to do with our relative security as nations and our priorities. And then she asked me about voting. She asked me about voting, and she knew what was going on here. And this is not a subject that was unique to my conversation with her, by the way, in terms of world leaders. Because people around the world watch what we do as America. And right now, we're about to take ourselves off the map as a role model if we let people destroy one of the most important pillars of a democracy, which is free and fair elections.
You're talking about what's happening in state capitals around the country.
I am. I'm talking about that, and I'm talking about what's not happening in this capital in Washington, D.C., which is the passing of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. This is literally about our standing in the world. It's about the integrity of our democracy. When our kids look back 5-10 years from now at this moment, it will be on our watch that we either stood for and fought for our democracy or not. And that, I think that is all at stake right now.
But you still have the reality of a 50-50 Senate.
Correct.
And you have two senators who say they're not on board for changing the filibuster in order to try to push this through. So how do you overcome that democratic reality of not having the votes and not having a clear path forward?
We will do and look at whatever is necessary to push for Congress to take this issue on. And we have to. We have to.
Carve out to the filibuster.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we are going to urge the United States Congress, and we have been, to examine the tools they have available, to do what is necessary to fight for and retain the integrity of our voting system in America.
It sounds like you're open, though, to a carve out to the filibuster to get there. You
I
were when you ran for president on the issue of climate. Are voting rights as important to you?
I believe that voting rights is one of the most significant issues that is facing us as individuals and as leaders today. There's no question. No question. Voting rights lead to every other right. Every other right. And so we need to prioritize it as a nation. I think it's really important that in this conversation about what's happening in Washington, D.C. on the issue of voting, that we not lose sight of the fact that there is one whole group of people, half of the United States Senate, who are refusing to even debate this issue.
But to that point, you were just in the Senate, and,
Yes.
and the president spent decades there. How come you can't pull someone across the aisle on
We
this,
are
or
trying.
manage Joe Manchin within your own party?
We are not going to give up on these issues. But you're right, it's a 50-50 Senate. It's a 50-50 Senate. And so, but it has to be a combination of us as an administration, but also everyone weighing in. And I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think we have to continue to elevate the conversation about voting rights. Given the daily grind that people are facing, this may not feel like an immediate or urgent matter, when in fact it is. And the more we have the opportunity to talk about it, the more I think people will see, yeah, I don't want an America of the future for my kids to be an America where we are suppressing the right of the American people to vote.
What do you see as the biggest national security challenge confronting the U.S.? What is the thing that worries you and keeps you up at night?
Frankly, one of them is our democracy. There is, I think, no question in the minds of people who are foreign policy experts that the year 2021 is not the year 2000. You know, I think there's so much about foreign and domestic policy that, for example, was guided and prioritized based on September 11th, 2001. And we are embarking on a new era where the threats to our nation take many forms, including the threat of autocracies taking over and having outsized influence around the world. And so I go back to our point about the need to fight for the integrity of our democracy. In addition, it is obviously about what we need to do on the climate crisis.
There are 100,000 Russian troops on the border with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a hot war in Europe in the next few weeks?
Well, we are having direct conversations with Russia. We are very clear that, that Russia should not invade the sovereignty of Ukraine, that we must stand up, and we are standing up for its territorial integrity. We are working with our allies in that regard, and we've been very clear that we are prepared to issue sanctions like you've not seen before.
Does that mean sanctioning Vladimir Putin directly?
I am not going to talk about specific sanctions, but we are making that clear to him, and we are in direct conversations. And we are also working very closely with our allies. And again, let's use this issue as an example of the importance of the strength of those relationships.
But in the past, alongside allies, we've sanctioned. It's been punitive. It hasn't prevented anything. It hasn't stopped Vladimir Putin to date.
And I'll repeat that the type of sanctions that we're talking about are sanctions that we've not done before.
You said you were last in the room on the decision in Afghanistan to pull out. You've talked about not abandoning allies. Do you feel personal responsibility for the chaos of that withdrawal?
I fully supported the president's decision to, after what was taking on the fact of being an endless war, of pulling American troops out. And I think it's really important to remember that the previous administration negotiated a deal with the Taliban, did not invite the Afghan government to be at the table, and negotiated a deal that required and promised, as part of an agreement, that we would pull out by the end of May. Mm-hmm. So we were saddled with that responsibility based on an agreement between the United States and the Taliban. And
you agreed to extend it and not to break the agreement with the Taliban.
We made the decision that if we were to break the agreement, it would have been a whole other situation. And right now, I strongly believe that had we broken that agreement, we would be talking about the war in Afghanistan mm-hmm. and American troops in Afghanistan. And we're not talking about that. I don't regret that.
But I know, as a candidate, you pledged to protect the gains that were made for Afghan women.
Yes, yeah. And I feel very strongly about that.
Many of those Afghan women are not in school today because the Taliban is in control.
Which is why we are working through the UN and doing what we need to do through our friends to provide humanitarian assistance, bypassing the Taliban, to make sure that we are supporting women and girls there. One of our big issues in terms of any conversations with the Taliban is exactly this point, which is the condition, the status, and the treatment of women and girls, including for girls, access to education. Not to mention our concern about counterterrorism and what we need to do in terms of that threat. So these are real issues, there's no question. The United States has been and continues to be, since the end of August, the biggest donor of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan.
But you know, a lot of that aid isn't able to make it into the people who need it because of the sanctions on the Taliban being controlled. So it's just Afghan women, do you worry that they were abandoned by the United States, essentially?
I worry that the Taliban has not complied with what we know to be the appropriate treatment and the right treatment of girls and women. And that's why we are taking the posture that we are with the Taliban right now, because that is one of our greatest considerations and concerns.
What do you think your biggest failure has been at this point?
To not get out of DC more. I mean, and I actually mean that sincerely for a number of reasons. A large part of the relationship that he and I have built has been being in this, together in the same office for hours on end, doing Zooms or whatever, because we couldn't get out of DC. And on issues that are about fighting for anything from voting rights to childcare to one of the issues that I care deeply about, maternal health. Being with the people who are directly impacted by this work, listening to them so that they, not some pundit, tells us what their priorities are, I think is critically important.
I've talked to some of your former Senate colleagues, and they say, you have been given an impossible portfolio. Donna Brazile, the former Democratic strategist, said, all the focus on turnover in your office is overblown, but you do need to renew and repurpose. Bakari Sellers said, her portfolio is trash. You give someone a portfolio that is not meant for them to succeed. Do you think any of this is fair? Do you think you're being set up to fail?
No, I don't believe I'm being set up to fail. But
because these are Democrats saying this.
But more important, I'm Vice President of the United States. Anything that I handle is because it's a tough issue. And it couldn't be handled at some other level. And there are a lot of big, tough issues that need to be addressed. And it has actually been part of my lifelong career to deal with tough issues. And this is no different.
Why do you think there is such scrutiny? I mean, women are always held to a different standard. That's just a fact. Is the fact that you're a woman and the fact that you are a minority in this office part of why there is such scrutiny?
I'll leave that for others to deal with. I have a job to do, and I'm going to get that job done. Let me just tell you, if you talk about being the first or being, maybe it's because I am, that For the first time, maternal health is on the stage at the White House, where we're bringing people in from around the country to talk about maternal mortality, to talk about issues like postpartum care and why we should extend Medicaid coverage so it's not just 60 days, but it's for a year because that's how long she needs that assistance. And to do it because it's the right thing to do, regardless of your gender, regardless of your race, and it affects so many women around our country.
We'll have a lot more of our conversation with the Vice President in 1 minute. Here's more of our conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris. When you hear people start talking about 2024, do you feel that's disrespectful to you and to the president?
I think that there are so many issues that are present issues in 2021 that I just don't have the luxury of engaging in that. You know, the pundits can sit back and do whatever they do.
Do you feel that what becomes possible is just going to dramatically change after 2022, since Republicans, many project, will be taking the majority?
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
You don't feel that calendar really pushing you to get things done in the year ahead, before the midterms?
I mean, I feel a great sense of urgency for a variety of reasons to do everything we do. And really, it really does boil down to the fact that, you know, I've done a lot of work as it relates to children. A day in the life of a child is a very long time. Mm-hmm. Sense of urgency, right? What we need to do to get public transit, to improve public transit, because people are going to work on buses every day and the buses are breaking down. Sense of urgency, right? I can go down the list. And it really, for me, the focus is on, you know, what wakes people up in the middle of the night. You know, I call it the 3 o'clock in the morning issue. You know, when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, for most people, what's on their mind is how are they going to pay their bills? How are they going to take care of their children? Are they going to have a roof over their head, right? These are real issues that affect people every day. They don't have the luxury of waiting about, you know, some chatter about what's going to happen in an election that's 3 years out. Mm-hmm. You know.
But for people that are going into their third year of this pandemic, you're talking about cost of living. Mm-hmm. Was it wrong to consider inflation transitory? I mean, these price spikes seem like they're going to be with us for a while.
We have to address the fact that we got to deal with the fact that folks are paying for gas, paying for groceries, and need solutions to it. So let's talk about that. Short-term solution includes what we need to do around the supply chain, right? So we went to the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, Savannah, Georgia, and said, hey guys, no more 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 24/7. Let's move the products because people need their they need what they need. We're dealing with it in terms of the long term, and that's about what we need to do to pass Build Back Better. It strengthens our economy. What do we need to do in terms of bringing down the cost of living?
Is that your top priority for the new year?
It is one of them. I don't have the luxury of having just one.
Fair point. Yeah. Fair point.
We got it done.
People saw you a flash of anger the other day when you did that interview with Charlemagne.
I can hear you.
So who's the real president of this country? Is it Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, Madam Vice President?
Come on, Charlemagne.
Come
on. It's Joe Biden.
I can't tell sometimes.
No. It's Joe Biden, and I'm Vice President, and my name is Kamala Harris. And the reality is, because we are in office, we do the things like the child tax credit, which is going to reduce black child poverty by 50%.
And people
Frustration.
said, frustration. Yes. Well, that frustration, we saw that in the Kavanaugh hearings. What gets you fired up?
Injustice. Injustice is just generally what will get me, you know, kind of, I don't like unfairness. And that is one of the things that will kind of cause me to say, okay, you know, some things are fairly innocuous, but unfairness in a way that can be hurtful to someone, you know, that's why I became a prosecutor, you know.
Do you think you were judged fairly?
I will leave others to make that decision.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The reports and the pictures coming in from Morocco, where an earthquake hit Friday, are stunning. More than 2,000 are dead, and that number is expected to climb as rescuers desperately try to find survivors in the rubble. The quake is the strongest to hit a North African country in 120 years, and the U.S. Geological Survey put it at a 6.8 magnitude. In other foreign news, President Biden met with leaders of the G20. Those are the 20 largest economies in the world, notably missing Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping. We'll have more on the president's trip later in the broadcast. Vice President Kamala Harris has also been conferring with allies. We met up with her in Indonesia late last week for the ASEAN Summit, a network of nations in Southeast Asia. While we were there, our polling unit surveyed Americans about the job the vice president is doing back home. Her approval rating tracks similarly to President Biden's at 41%. Republicans have been focusing a lot of their attacks on Harris, highlighting that she would be in line for the job of president should anything happen to President Biden. And it is Republicans who say they have heard a lot about her work, more so than Democrats. Our conversation in Jakarta allowed us the opportunity to ask about her work and a lot more.
So you're 58 now. If you win a second term, as you and the president are running to do, he would be 86 at the end of it. And we are seeing Republican candidates hone in on you in particular as being next up for that job. Nikki Haley says
a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris.
Chris Christie.
I want to be clear that I pray every night for Joe Biden's good health, not only because he's our president, but because of who our vice president is.
Ron DeSantis.
Harris is his impeachment insurance. People know if she were president, Katie barred the door. As bad as Biden did, it would get worse.
How do you respond to all of that?
We are delivering for the American people. And the reality of it is that, unfortunately, very few of those who would challenge our administration actually have a plan for America. You look at what we have accomplished, Margaret. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America, 13 million new jobs, unemployment at record lows. We have capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription drugs on an annual basis at $2,000
They're talking
for
about
seniors.
what you would do as president as being a risk. They're honing in on you. Why do you think that is? How do you respond to those attacks? That's not about policy, that's about you.
Listen, this is not new. There's nothing new about that. I mean, listen, in my career, I was a career prosecutor. I was the first woman elected district attorney of San Francisco, a major city in this country, and reelected. I was the first woman attorney general of the second largest Department of Justice in the United States and reelected. I was a United States Senator. I represented 1 in 8 Americans, and I'm now Vice President of the United States. They feel the need to attack because they're scared that we will win based on the merit of the work that Joe Biden and I and our administration has done.
But even Democrats are worried about the president's age. The Wall Street Journal had a poll showing 2/3 of Democrats say Joe Biden is too old to run again. Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine. And let me tell you something. I work with Joe Biden every day. Under Joe Biden's leadership, we have transformed and are in the process of transforming America's infrastructure with an historic investment in not only roads and bridges, but high-speed internet, what we are doing around issues like lead pipes, and I could go on and on.
Are you taking the threat of a second Trump presidency seriously enough?
I don't understand the question.
You were dismissive of some of the Republican criticism of you and the president. When you look at current polling, the front runner for a Republican nomination is the former president, the 45th president.
We will win re-election.
You will win.
We will win re-election. There is too much at stake, and the American people know it.
In terms of delivering on promises, you in your portfolio have tackled the issue of the root cause of migration. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol saw a record number of migrant families cross the border in the month of August. This despite that record level of heat. Why is that happening now? You've rolled out new policies.
Around the globe, we are seeing an increase in irregular migration. And there are a number of factors at play. An increase in authoritarian regimes, what we're seeing in terms of extreme weather occurrences, what we're seeing in terms of, in many places around the globe, increasing food insecurity. So there are many reasons for why this is happening, and America is not immune to that. The point has to be then to understand what we must do to deal with, one, ensuring that we have a secure, humane, and orderly policy about the border, but also what we must do in the long term to address the root causes of migration. The work that I've been doing in that regard has been to build public-private partnerships to the extent that we have now raised over $4 billion to invest in the countries in that region.
But that migration data, according to CBP, is showing migrants from Guatemala are up, Honduras, Ecuador, Peru. So when the border crossings went down earlier in the summer, the administration said it was due to your policies working. Now they're going back up as they did in the month of August. Does that show the strategy is no longer working?
Absolutely not. What it means is that we have to stay focused on a number of issues related to the irregular migration that, again, we're seeing around the world, and America is not immune.
Do you think the strategy is working, despite the numbers being up?
Overall, we are seeing progress. But we're not going to have a constant. There are going to be fluctuations. That is normal, just like the weather fluctuates and circumstances fluctuate, such as elections in those regions and what that might mean. It doesn't mean that we keep our foot off the gas. We have to stay focused and understand there has to be a long-term strategy as well as a short-term strategy.
So was it too early to say that the strategy was working when the numbers went down?
My point is that focusing on root causes and doing the work that we have been doing to bring U.S. investment into those countries in a way that is supportive of their economies and supportive of fighting corruption actually works.
You have been very active on the issue of abortion and rallying behind the idea of this federal law to restore what was upheld in Roe versus Wade. But to do that, Democrats need 60 votes in the Senate. They need a majority in the House they don't have. They need the presidency. The math doesn't add up. So don't you need to level with the American people and say this is not a realistic promise to make for 2024?
Congress has the ability to put back in place the rights that the Supreme Court took from the women of America.
In theory, it doesn't have the votes to do that.
That's why we have elections. And that's why we are seeing around this country that when this issue is on the ballot, from Kansas to California, people vote in favor of upholding basic freedoms. The vast majority of Americans agree that the government should not be making this decision for the women of America.
What is it that you believe? I mean, what week of pregnancy should abortion access be cut off?
We need to restore the protections of Roe versus Wade.
We're
not trying to do something new.
Well, that was nebulous because it was about viability, which could be anywhere between 20 to 24 weeks.
No. Let me be very clear.
The Women's Health Protection Act that the White House also endorsed.
Let me be very clear. From day one, the president has been clear. I have been clear. We need to put back the protections that are in Roe v. Wade into law. Since the Supreme Court took it, Congress has the power and ability to pass legislation to put those protections back in law, and Joe Biden will sign that bill. So that is what we want.
But does it need to be specific in terms of defining and where that guarantee goes up to and where it does not, at which week of pregnancy?
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe versus Wade.
You
We
know
are
why
not-
I'm asking you
but
this question,
but
though, because
we're not trying to. But we're not trying to do anything that did not exist before June of last year. We are saying
it wasn't
no,
crafted into law. And that's why I'm asking you for the
But if-
specifics there,
if-
because Republicans say the lack of a precise date in cutting it off. You know this. They say that allows Democrats to perform abortions up until, birth.
Which is ridiculous.
Which is statistically not accurate.
And it's ridiculous,
I
and it's a
understand that.
mischaracterization of the point. No, the point is,
but
the
do you
point
need to
is
be
we
more
have
precise?
I am being precise. We need to put into law the protections of Roe versus Wade, and that is about going back to where we were before the Dobbs decision.
But if there is the possibility through legislation to provide any kind of guarantee at the federal level, any kind of protection, like the Republican proposal of 15 weeks protection.
The Republicans
Is
are
it
also
worth doing something?
members of the Republican Party are also proposing a national ban. The thing that
I'm talking about the Lindsey Graham bill, as you know, and those proposals of giving some access, though that's 15 weeks. Why do you think it shouldn't be specific? Out in New Mexico, for example, the governor there says it shouldn't be nailed down to a week because it should be a private matter between a woman and her doctor. There shouldn't be a precise number put on that. Is that what you believe as well?
I believe that we should put the protections of Roe v. Wade into law, and the way that will happen is if we have a United States Congress who, regardless of their personal view for themselves or their family, would agree that the women of America should be trusted to make decisions about their life and their body based on what they know to be in their best interest. It's that simple.
We'll have more of our interview with the Vice President in our next half hour. Although it was not surprising that Vladimir Putin would skip the G20 summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping's absence was noted, both there and at the ASEAN summit. President Biden told reporters today in Hanoi that he was concerned China was, quote, changing the rules of the game, and that he met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who did attend both meetings. Here's more of our conversation with the Vice President.
China's rewriting the global order. Your national security strategy says they are the only power in the world with the intent and the ability to do that.
There's no question that we are very concerned about the Chinese government's actions on the South China Sea and how that is impacting the security and the future prosperity of the nations that are affected. For example, I was recently in the Philippines, and I've been spending a lot of time with President Marcos. What is happening in terms of unprovoked actions against the Philippine interest in the South China Sea is significant, and we have been very clear that we stand with the Philippines.
They're a treaty ally. The U.S. would have to militarily defend them.
Not only is there a treaty relationship, but the very basic issue that the American people will experience and feel if we're not on top of it is what that will mean in terms of commerce flowing freely through those waters.
How concerned are the leaders you spoke with here about the potential for a military clash?
I think the issue that is most present here among the Southeast Asian leaders is that there be a respect for and enforcement of international rules and norms, but they hope that there will be an avoidance of conflict. And that there's a great symmetry between that and our policy toward China. We do not invite conflict, but we absolutely are prepared to and engaged in what is necessary to compete.
So when President Biden said the other day that China was a ticking time bomb, he was talking about their current economic problems that they are experiencing. He said that's not good because when bad folks have problems, they do bad things. What is the scenario that you are thinking about and worried about the most?
We, as the United States, and our policy is not about decoupling. It is about de-risking. It is about understanding.
It's not about pulling out U.S.
It's not about pulling out, but it is about ensuring that we are protecting American interests and that we are a leader in terms of the rules of the road, as opposed to following others' rules.
But President Biden was, I think, he was talking about the economic problems within China right now. He seemed to be suggesting that Xi Jinping might take some kind of action.
It's no secret that China is experiencing economic problems. And what you will find is, certainly in my conversations with American business leaders, is that they are looking at the future in terms of their capital investments and taking into account which countries are engaged in practices that are about abiding by the rule of law and international rules and norms in a way that they can be guaranteed that there will be some stability so they can make long-term investments. There is increasingly an understanding that China may not be the best bet when you are looking for stability, when you are looking for an investment in a place where there is an adherence to and respect for international rules and norms.
This November, the United States will host a big summit of leaders in San Francisco. China said a few days ago, their state security service, the U.S. needs to show sufficient sincerity before Xi Jinping agrees to visit. How important is it for Xi Jinping to come to America in November?
Well, it is important to the order of things, if you will, the stability of things, that we keep open lines of communication.
You were in the same room with China's number 2
yes,
today.
I have actually met with President Xi as well.
Did you talk to him today?
Well, we exchanged pleasantries, yes. Yes.
But it's still a little tense.
I don't think it's as simple, if you will, as whether there's tension. Yes, there's tension when you are in a competition of any sort, but that does not mean that we are seeking conflict.
Right.
And I think it's important to not conflate the two. Do we have disagreements, for example, very serious disagreements about what's happening in the South China Sea? Yes, and we're very clear about that. So one could argue that there's tension there, but you look, for example, at trade, 99% of our trade is not influenced by what we are doing in terms of the restrictions on exports.
So you want Xi Jinping to come in November?
I think he is absolutely an important player in this region of the world, and if he comes, then that will be, I'm sure, something that could be productive.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un, as you know, is expected, according to U.S. intelligence, to go meet with Vladimir Putin in Russia in exchange for some military support potentially here. How destabilizing would that be for Asia?
I think it would be a huge mistake. I think it would be a huge mistake. First of all, when you look at Russia's unprovoked war on Ukraine and the idea that they would supply ammunition to Russia, well, it's predictable where that ends up. I also believe very strongly that for both Russia and North Korea, this will further isolate them.
Some of the most sanctioned countries in the world at this point.
But at some point, it's just a step too far.
What is that step too far? I mean, what is it that Kim Jong-un is seeking? Is it nuclear submarines, as our allies in Seoul have said they're concerned about? Is it satellites? What does that do here in Asia?
Our allies are telling us about their concern about what's happening in terms of North Korea. We are all absolutely clear and unequivocal about our goal of the complete denuclearization of North Korea. But when we think about Russia's aggression in Ukraine, many, at most, are very clear also. It's an absolute violation of one of the most important agreements that we have around the world in terms of international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And Margaret, on that matter, it is very clear that Russia has they're very desperate. They have already experienced a strategic failure. So clearly this is an act of desperation on the part of Russia. But it would be a huge mistake for Korea to do this, for North Korea to do this.
Our full interview with the Vice President is on our website and YouTube channel. We'll be right back.